welcome to the Dynamic Duel Podcast, a weekly show where we review superhero films and debate the superiority between Marvel and DC by comparing their characters in stat-based battle simulations. I'm Marvelous Joe.
And I'm his twin brother, Johnny DC.
And in this episode, we are going to review the DC animated film Batman The Long Halloween Part 2, which was a sequel to Batman The Long Halloween Part 1, a movie that we reviewed about 5 episodes ago.
Yeah, Part 1, we rated a whopping 4.5 stars out of 5. It was fantastic. We even said it was probably one of the best Batman films to come out, ever. So was Part 2 a successful conclusion that matched the splendor of Part 1? We'll find out later on in this episode.
Yeah, before we get into that review, we'll be talking about the comic book movie news to have come out in the past week, including the news that the Venom There Be Carnage movie has been pushed back a few weeks, as well as the official teaser we got for Doom Patrol Season 3.
As always, we list our segment times in our episode description, so feel free to check out the show notes if you want to skip ahead to a particular topic.
We want to give you guys a quick update as to what's going on with the whole paywall situation. Jonathan and I are currently set up on Apple Podcast subscriptions. Basically, we're all ready to go. We still have to flip the switch, but we don't want to do that yet until we're ready to go on Spotify. We're just waiting for Spotify to set us up in their paid system. Their technical support says it could take anywhere from, a week to a month. So we're just kind of in a holding pattern with them, but we don't want to launch the paywall until we can make sure that you guys can access it on a number of platforms, not just Apple Podcasts, because we don't want to limit you guys there. But if you guys have been listening to the show, you know that once we go behind the paywall, only the most recent 4 episodes of this podcast will be available for free. Prior to that, all of the archived content will only be available to subscribers who pay $2 a month, either on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Patreon.
Yeah, so if you guys want access to over 200 episodes of archived content, including our Man of Steel review, Scarecrow vs. Mysterio duel, our Dark Knight review, Catwoman vs. Hellcat, or our Superman Man of Tomorrow review, be sure to subscribe to this podcast.
Yeah, if you do it on Patreon, you also get access to our bonus content. Again, it's only $2 a month to subscribe, and you can do so by visiting the link in our episode description. We want to give a shout out to our new patron, Max Boyle, who, if you guys know, is the host of the Ready to Retro podcast, who has guested on this show before in our Spider-Man review.
Yeah, he actually became a patron when we guested on his show when we were reviewing Batman vs. the Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, Batman vs. the Ninja Turtles was a movie that we wanted to review for this podcast, but never really got around to it, so we were fortunate enough to be part of Ready to Retro's TMNT month, where we talked about this film. And it was really good, guys. If you want to hear us talk about Batman vs. TMNT, check out Ready to Retro podcast. That's the numeral 2. You can listen to them on any podcast app that you currently have. And it was a blast to be on their show. It's a well-known fact that Max Boyle is the nicest guy in podcasting, and he puts so much work into his show. And it's always a lot of fun, not just to be a part of, but also to listen to. It was actually a really super cool surprise on behalf of Max to join our Patreon during the time of that recording, and we want to give him a very big, heartfelt thank you. Max and Chris and Chelsea are just the best.
They are the greatest.
And you can listen to a trailer for their show after this episode, so stay tuned for that. Also, we want to wish one of our patrons a very happy birthday. The day this episode drops will be Zachary Hepburn's birthday.
Yeah, he's one of our executive producers.
He's super active on our Discord.
And he's really good at Fortnite.
If I had to give you a birthday gift to Zach, I would give you Herbie the Robot, because not only is he a nanny, he's also a super advanced computer that you could probably game on.
And I would give you Bloodsport's badass gun that he assembles at the end of the Suicide Squad, because it's just cool.
Wishing you a fantastic year, Zach. And with that out of the way,
quick to the No Prize. So a No Prize is an award that Marvel used to give out up until the 90s to fans. Our version, the Dynamic Duel No Prize, is a digital award that we post on social media that I personally draw for those who we feel gave the best answer to our question of the week. Last week's question tied into the new trailer drop for Venom There Be Carnage. Carnage looked really cool, and so we asked, who is the coolest looking villain from a Marvel or DC film and why?
Yeah, we also phrased the question what villain character would you want to cosplay as if cost were not an issue? We got quite a few answers. We have 3 honorable mentions to go down, as well as the No Prize winner. So let's get to it. Our first honorable mention goes to Nick Abanto, who said,
Hey Johnny and Joe, Nick Abanto of the week. Gotta say, coolest supervillain film, Jared Leto's Joker. Hands down, Jeff Bridges, because he's just the coolest dude. And from the very first hands down, one of the coolest suits in all of defense, Tony Stark. Anyways, thank you. Great work. Bye.
He had some technical difficulties, but it sounds like he gave the joke answer of Jared Leto's Joker, which is hilarious, I had to say. When I first heard that, I did a spit take. But then he corrected himself and said that it was Ironmonger, played by Jeff Bridges, because not only is the Ironmonger suit really badass looking, like a hulkish Iron Man figure, he's also played by the Dude. And we all know that the Dude is the coolest character in all of film history.
I don't know. Did Jeff Bridges have a tattoo on his forehead that said "damaged"? Like
God,
a badass?
No.
Like a badass. You know how cool you have to be to pull that off? Real cool. Our next honorable mention goes to Michael Haggerty, who said,
"Hey guys, Michael Haggerty here. So I already cosplay as Peacemaker in those tidy whities. Yeah, I just put that image in your head. How do you feel about that? Yep, like Starro, just growing from your conscious thoughts. But anyway, I'm going to say Bloodsport, seriously, because his mask was based off the Xenomorph from Aliens, and it'd be cool to have all these little gadgets and stuff all around your costume, just like in the film. So that's my answer. I'm sticking to it. See you guys later. Peace out. Wasting time."
Yeah, I always love how he fills up the 30 seconds of time. But no, Bloodsport is a fantastic answer. I mean, he wasn't really the villain of the Suicide Squad, but he is a supervillain from the comics. And the way they reinvented his costume for the movie was amazing. And it's one that I love seeing in the comics now.
I think so many people are going to cosplay as Bloodsport once, cons come back and people are able to cosplay again.
Yeah, dude, I would love to cosplay as Bloodsport.
Yeah.
That'd be so cool. As long as I could see through that mask, I'll be good.
He's going to be like the number one new popular character at the cons for sure.
I could see people dressing up as Peacemaker, too. That actually was a surprisingly good costume as well.
In his tidy whities?
No, not fucking that. Damn it.
I hope people don't cosplay as that. But that would be hilarious. Thanks for the answer, Michael Haggerty. Our next honorable mention goes to Miggy Matangian, who said,
"Hey guys, it's Miggy, and the coolest looking villain is Black Manta. His armor and his helmet look dope. I love the sword he has on his arm, and I can't wait to see the upgrades he gets in the sequel."
Oh man, yeah, like one of the coolest comic villains of all time is Black Manta, and a lot of that has to do with his look.
His dope-ass helmet.
Yeah, totally. And I love the way they did it in the movie. I just squealed with glee when he appeared on the screen. It was so fantastic.
It was so faithful in adaptation, and it could look dorky, but they translated it to screen in such a perfect way, even rationalizing why the helmet is so big.
Yeah, it totally could look dorky, like Super Friends style, but it wasn't. It was badass to its core.
I think it would be cool to see someone cosplay as that, but I also think they'd run into a lot of things and fall over a lot.
No, dude, everyone just backs away from you, just in awe of how awesome you look. That would also be one expensive cosplay.
Yeah, it would. Thanks, guys, for your answers. We also want to give a shout out to Jacob Bell for reaching out on our website and leaving his answer. He just started a new podcast. If you want to listen to it, go check out the Rankers podcast, where he and his buddy rank the top 10 of all different sorts of things.
Yeah, definitely check that out.
But the winner of this week's Snow Prize goes to Tyson Lee, who said,
"Hello, Dynamic Duel podcast. I would say the coolest supervillain ever is Joker from Batman the 1960s. I think it was the 60s. I'm sorry if I got it wrong. The show with his mustache and his beautiful hair and his suit. Perfection. Perfection. That's what I would call perfection. And I have 4 seconds to spare, so bye.
Taken after Michael Haggerty with that ending right there. But no, I freaking love this answer. Cesar Romero playing the Joker in the 1960s Batman television TV show and movie is perfection.
It is iconic.
You know why? Because he's a badass that doesn't take any guff from anybody, and he decided to leave his mustache on, not shave it off for the character, and they just painted white over it. You know why? Because they wanted him for the role that badly.
And honestly, I never noticed that he had a mustache until someone pointed it out. Until I read it in Wizard magazine, and I was like, what? And then, yeah, sure enough, there it is. He just acted so well, it didn't even matter that he still had a mustache. Congrats once again to Tyson Lee. You win this week's No Prize. If you, the listener, want a shot at winning your own No Prize, stay tuned to later on in this episode when we'll be asking another question of the week.
And now that that's done,
on to the news.
Guys, I thought we were totally done with news items like this, but we have to report once again that a movie has been delayed due to COVID. Because of the rising COVID cases due to the Delta variant, we're probably going to see quite a few movies later on this year be pushed back to later dates. The first casualty of the summer movie season for this year is Venom, Let There Be Carnage. Surprisingly, they're only pushing it back 3 weeks. Its original release date was September 24th, and they're moving it back to October 15th, which is also, a good time frame for this movie because that's right around Halloween, and I think Venom and Carnage kind of play well with that spooky monster kind of vibe. But it's a real bummer because it may be a signifier of things to come. We know that Sony does not have any sort of streaming platform to release their films on day and date like Disney Plus or HBO Max, so their only option is to release in theaters, and they want to make sure that conditions are ideal to do that so that they can make some kind of return on their films. I don't believe that pushing the movie back 3 weeks is going to have any sort of impact on Venom's box office performance. Doesn't really make sense to me. I have a feeling that this movie is going to be pushed back again. What I really hope doesn't happen, though, is that the Spider-Man No Way Home movie gets pushed back.
Considering all of the analysts are predicting that COVID will only get worse as you get closer to the winter season, I think this is a huge mistake. And I think they would get better numbers if they just stuck with their, original September release date.
Yeah, because September still has fairly warm temperatures, at least where we live. Even though it's technically fall, you're not really quite full on into fall weather. So I have to agree. I think moving to October is a mistake. I think they will get better results if they had kept their original date. But you know what? They don't ask us. So what the fuck do we know, right?
More than them.
This puts a particular dilemma on this podcast due to the fact that within a 3-week span, we have 5 different Marvel and DC pieces of media coming out and or finishing their seasons, such as Venom 2, What If Season 1, Titans Season 3, the Eternals movie, and Doom Patrol Season 3. That's all within the end of October and the beginning of November. So we're going to have 5 review episodes in a row to do in that time frame. So we're probably going to do 5 dual episodes back to back to back to back to back right before that, just to keep things even, because we like to keep things even.
Yeah. We know a lot of you guys like duels. We know a lot of you guys like reviews. We try and mix it up for everyone. We should have seen this coming when they didn't put the release date on the end of that trailer that released last week.
Yeah, the writing was on the wall.
Yeah, for sure. And I really, really think Spider-Man No Way Home is not coming out this year.
Didn't I tell you not to say that ever again? You said it in our last episode. I told you jinxed it. Look what you did. You jinxed it. Everybody blame Jonathan. Give him shit in whatever way you can, because it's all his fault.
Don't shoot the messenger, dude. I'm just the messenger.
No, we'll shoot the jinxer is what we'll do.
If I actually get shot, you're going to feel real bad.
No, it won't.
Jeez.
We'll see if this affects any other Sony films, like the upcoming James Bond movie, or even Morbius, which is scheduled to come out on January 21st. We'll see if that gets pushed back as well. Maybe Venom will take that slot. Who knows? Once again, it just feels like everything's up in the air, and it's not a great feeling.
And I can't wait for all this bullshit to be over.
Get vaccinated, people.
And stay alive. In lighter news, we got the first official teaser for Doom Patrol Season 3, which I've been looking forward to for a really long time. It was so sad how Season 2 ended on that cliffhanger due to COVID coming out and preventing them from, filming that last episode. This trailer picks up, right where that season ended, with all of them going up against the Candlemaker in that amusement park.
Do you think it was a little bit of a cop-out that it turns out that everybody was just merely covered in wax by the Candlemaker? Because I thought they got turned into wax. Being covered in wax is, much less consequential than being turned into wax. I thought it was a little bit of a cop-out. I was like, oh, okay, that's convenient. I mean, you could cover me in wax and I could just bust out of it. It wasn't nearly as, drastic as I thought the Season 2 ender actually was.
We don't know what's going to happen here. They could have been wax, and then Dorothy could have done something by changing reality or something. Who knows? The show is so bonkers, I have no idea what to expect.
All I know is that the Candlemaker is much less cool than I originally thought he was.
Shut the hell up. No, he's not. He's going to beat your ass.
What?
Shut up.
The show is still great, though. Doom Patrol Season 1 and Doom Patrol Season 2 are some of my most favorite comic book superhero television seasons of all time, and hopefully this third season lives up to it. It looks like much of the same, which is really the best thing that I can say about it, because everything about the show is great.
Yeah, the show is so unique and so good. We actually reviewed season 2, I think last year.
Yep.
And we gave it 4 stars. I think it would have been close to 4.5 or even 5 stars if they would have finished out the season properly. Of course, they couldn't do that, but that just makes me look forward all that much more to this season.
Yeah, season 1 would have probably been 4.5 stars if we reviewed it. One day we will.
I'm really excited for season 3. We already know that the Sisterhood of Dada will be in it, which is sort of a play on the Brotherhood of Dada from the comics.
Is that a reference to Dadaism, which was like the absurd, nonsensical art style?
Yeah, it's sort of like making art for the sake of art itself. In this case, they like do evil for the sake of evil without any real purpose to it.
The series of Doom Patrol itself is very much Dadaist.
Oh yeah, the series is very inspired by Grant Morrison's run on the comics, which, is just as bonkers as the show. And this trailer, it has so many like absurd elements in it. I don't know if it's just because they don't have enough footage to show, but they could get away with something like this for sure.
Yeah, especially when you see things like gorillas wearing hats. Is that Gorilla Grodd?
No, that's Monsieur Mala.
Oh.
You also get to see his partner, his lover, the Brain, as well.
Oh, okay. You also see the flesh-eating butts from season 1.
It's the butts! And we get to see Madame Rouge in this trailer, who I think they were saying was going to be the primary villain of this season.
Interestingly, we don't get too much Dorothy footage.
No, we don't get too much Dorothy footage or the Chief footage, which I really hope Timothy Dalton is returning for this season. That'll be really sad if he's not. This trailer has me super pumped, super excited for season 3. It even threw in like a what the fuck in there from Robot Man.
It was definitely a good tease. Showed a lot without showing too much, and piqued my interest as to what could be happening to these characters that I know and love so well by now.
For people who don't know and love these characters, though, I'm really wondering what they'll think of this trailer. Like, is this gonna pique anyone else's interest who's unfamiliar with the show? I hope it does. I hope people who haven't seen the show before tune into it. I know the first season was really difficult to watch because it was exclusive to the DC Universe app when that was a thing. But if you have HBO Max, seasons 1 and 2 are available, and I cannot recommend enough that you watch those.
And if you just don't feel like it, I guess that brings us to our question of the week.
Have you watched Doom Patrol? And if not, why don't you like awesome television?
Oh, we went there. Record your answer at dynamicduel.com by clicking on the red microphone button in the bottom right-hand corner, which will prompt you to leave us a voicemail. Your message can be up to 30 seconds long, and don't forget to leave your name in case we include you on the podcast. We'll pick our favorite answer and draw that person a Dynamic Duel No Prize that we'll post to social media. Be sure to answer before August 21st.
But that does it for all of the news for this episode. But now let's get into our main event, where we review DC's animated film, Part 2 of Batman: The Long Halloween. Batman: The Long Halloween Part 2 is the second half of DC's animated adaptation of Batman: The Long Halloween, one of Batman's seminal comic stories that was written by Jeff Loeb and illustrated by Tim Sale. This, of course, was the sequel to Part 1, which we reviewed over a month ago and gave it high praise as one of the best on-screen adaptations of Batman ever.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think I said in that review that when I first watched Part 1, I had no criticisms to give it. I thought it was an exceptionally well done adaptation of this story.
Near perfect, right? So did the second half of this story match the quality that was set up by the first film? Mostly, yes. Everything I loved about the first film, the animation, the voice work, and the upgraded story elements are still on display here, with, however, some not so minor issues with some of the changes the filmmakers made in adapting the story. As we mentioned in our previous review, The Long Halloween is a murder mystery, one with lots of twists as you try to figure out who the killer is. So if you haven't seen both parts 1 and 2, do yourself a favor and check them out. Make it a double feature, it'll be well worth your time, but avoid this for now because we will be going into major spoilers.
It's so worth your time. Even if you're a Marvel fan and you don't enjoy watching DC animated films, this should be the exception that you make. This movie is well worth it, especially if you're fans of cinema, especially classic like gangster cinema like Goodfellas or The Godfather or things like that, because I really feel like this story is in the same vein as those.
In our last review, I refer to this as the godfather of superhero animated films, and that still holds true.
Oh, definitely.
Now, reviewing this film was something of a challenge, considering parts 1 and 2 are essentially two halves of the same film. Everything I mentioned in the last review regarding the detective noir tone, the gangster film genre qualities, and the clean animation style still stand out here and are noteworthy.
Occasionally while watching this film, I would just hit pause and just revel in these beautiful textures that are on display. There's tremendous detail in the backgrounds, in the set design. It's really a sight to behold. I feel like they put so much more work into this movie than they did the other animated films that are in this animated movie universe, including Justice Society World War II and Superman Man of Tomorrow.
Oh yeah, totally. They even went above and beyond here, experimenting with the animation styles, like when Batman went into his hallucinogenic fear toxin mode.
Yeah.
It like the strokes that they applied to the characters and everything, it had a much more of a brush-like effect. It was really, really interesting.
Yeah, it's still computer animated, but I don't even care. This is probably the best you could get with a two-dimensional computer animated art style that's still vector-based, but gives the appearance that it's cell animation.
Yeah, the lighting here has a lot to do with that. It looks so good. Now, in our review of part 1, we also talked about the film's steady and intricate pacing, for which we commended the filmmakers on their decision to split the film into two parts to take their time exploring and unpacking the source material in order to do it justice. I knew from where they ended the first film, just after New Year's Day, that part 2 would be jam-packed, as it covered the remaining 10 months of the story. The film cut a surprising amount of story from the comic in order to squeeze into a 90-minute runtime, but I think it was mostly successful in capturing the comic's most important elements while updating and upgrading some of that story, just as they did in part 1, to keep it interesting even for those of us who read the comic and knew its surprises.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I disliked about this movie over part 1, was that, every holiday in part 1 felt like this big, dreadful event. Whereas with this movie, they hit Valentine's Day and St. Patrick's Day and April Fool's Day and everything. Like, it was nothing. It was just like Bruce Wayne could have been reading the paper and been like, oh, it's Easter? Oh, is that holiday killer thing still happening? Oh, okay. It was just kind of an afterthought almost, the way it was presented here.
Yeah, it was kind of unfortunate that March literally lasted 5 seconds, before moving on to April Fool's Day.
Yeah.
But I understand why, in a way, they had to do it. I wish they would have just, extended the runtime. I would have loved to have had another half hour here.
Yeah. Although I will say that the pacing was a little off here.
Yeah, this half was more rushed, so it did result in some plot holes, and not all of the decisions they made regarding changing the original story made sense, primarily the end of the film where we learned that Batman knows of Gilda's involvement in the holiday killings. Now in the comics, the reveal that Gilda was the first holiday killer is such a gut-punching surprise, and one made even more resonant in that Batman never came to that same revelation. Because Alberto Falcone faked his death in the comics, he was able to pick up where Gilda left off. And he was so thrilled at having become a supervillain and rendering his father's crime business obsolete that he took credit for all of the killings, except for Falcone's on that last Halloween. Gilda, whose only motive in the comics was wanting to finally start a family with her husband, literally got away with murder. Her husband Harvey knew what she'd done, but never told anyone. It was a poetic, romantic, unbelievable ending to this story of how a good man like Harvey Dent became Two-Face, and it suggested that there was still some sense of honor and love within Dent. Now, in this film, Batman does learn Gilda was involved, but we're left unclear as to which killings are attributed to Gilda, except for Sal Maroni. We're also unclear as to whether Batman turns Gilda in for punishment, or if he honors his friend Dent's apparent wish to keep his tortured wife's name clean. We don't know, and at first I hated that, but the more I dwelt on it, the more I realized that I wouldn't be happy with either outcome, considering Gilda's motivation in this film was much more than just selfishly wanting more time with her husband. In this film, it's established that Gilda and Alberto both went to Oxford, they got pregnant, they got married, but that Carmine forced their annulment and Gilda's abortion, which left her reproductive organs damaged and her unable to bear any more children. I literally can't think of anything more heartbreaking, and it's easy to see why Gilda would become obsessed with revenge, even going so far as to marry a politically ambitious lawyer like Harvey Dent, just in the hopes of bringing down the Falcone Empire. Now, she grew to love Dent in the end, and I think it's heavily implied that Dent was aware of what the Falcones did to his wife, since he not only was aware of Alberto, but was also very protective of Gilda when it came to the Falcone family.
What didn't make sense to me, though, is that Harvey Dent was in the process of bringing down the Falcone Empire through his contact with Falcone's nephew.
Yeah, Johnny Viti.
Yeah, this whole thing started off, though, with Gilda killing that contact. I'm not sure why she would sabotage her husband's work to take down the very man that she so despised.
Yeah, it's a huge plot hole, and I don't have an answer because we don't know who killed Johnny Viti. We don't know if it was Gilda or if it was Harvey.
I'm pretty sure it was Gilda.
Yeah, because why would Harvey sabotage his own work?
Exactly. What also didn't make sense to me is why she would implicate her husband in those crimes. Now, we know that during Independence Day, Falcone tried to kill Gilda. The hitman failed and fought Harvey Dent. They were both knocked out, and the hitman was killed by the Holiday Killer, making it look like it was done by Harvey. But obviously was done by Gilda, who didn't bother to at least remove her husband from the crime scene.
Well, a number of things. We don't actually know whether Falcone was trying to kill Gilda. It's implied that he knew Gilda was the Holiday Killer, but we're not sure.
And that's not cool.
Yeah, I agree. But we also don't know that Harvey didn't kill the nameless assassin. He had blood on his hands. He may have just blacked out as a result of, his burgeoning multiple personality disorder.
That's true. Yeah, I guess he could have, went unconscious, and then the villainous Two-Face killed the guy, left the Statue of Liberty statue there and the gun with the rubber nipple on it, and then he blacked out again and woke up as the Harvey Dent side of himself.
Exactly. There's so many unanswered questions here that were answered in the comics, so, this story is very different. This story means that Harvey Dent was much more of a murderous monster early in the story than he was in the comics. Harvey Dent was supposed to be, this tragic, innocent figure, wrongfully accused, with those accusations ultimately becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy when he was driven over the edge into becoming Two-Face. In this film, it's not so much of an edge as it is a slippery slope that began long before we even realized, and the movie does, I think, a better job than the comic in showing us Dent's gradual descent into madness, with the voices in his head, with waking up from a blackout with blood on his hands. Those elements were not in the comic.
The slow descent into madness, I think, is quite a compelling concept when it comes to film. Have you ever seen the movie Session 9?
No.
It's a horror film starring David Caruso about basically an asbestos removal cleaner whose team is cleaning up this old mental asylum. And through the course of the film, he slowly slips into insanity, and you hear a voice that just comes out of nowhere occasionally. This very scary voice that tells him to do bad things.
Well, that sounds like I would never want to see that film.
But that kind of happens here. There were some parts that where I actually jumped when you hear Two-Face's voice, out of nowhere, say, kill them all.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
I think, actually, that was very inspired by Session 9, because there's a very similar scene in that movie. But it's really effective, I think, in putting you at unease. I guess the major problem here is that we just don't know the specifics of how that madness built within this story.
I think it's in part just him being driven mad, knowing what these horrible people did to his wife. I think that's enough to make anyone go crazy. And I think that's a really interesting update to the character of Harvey Dent. So I like different elements from both the comic and this movie. I'm somewhat torn as to which one did it better. Each version is so different and so good for different reasons. If anyone's read both the comic and seen this movie, which, if you haven't, oh my gosh, why didn't you listen earlier and stop listening before everything was spoiled? But if you've experienced both versions of the story, reach out to us and let us know which one you prefer. I'm really curious what people think. Now, when we talked about part 1, I also theorized that this half of the film would contain a lot more action, supervillain action in particular, because The Long Halloween was written in part as a way to show how the balance of power in Gotham's underworld shifted from organized crime to Batman's colorful cast of villains. Oftentimes, Batman films are accused of showcasing his villains much more than Batman himself, but that's not the case here, luckily, except for maybe Catwoman, who actually sees more action in this film than Batman, since she gets into it with not only Poison Ivy, but the nameless assassin who went after the Dents.
Catwoman is this story's great deus ex machina. She always shows up exactly when the story calls for it, and she kicks ass and saves the day when she's needed to.
Totally.
I thought it was a little bit unfair, especially considering that Batman really seemed to take a step back in terms of his agency on the story.
I think they did it like one too many times, like just one time too many.
Where Catwoman interfered at the right time?
Yeah. Like on the 4th of July with the assassin. I don't think she needed to be there.
Yeah. It's like she was just kind of like hanging around Falcone and his goons like all the time with nothing better to do, only choosing to jump in precisely when she was needed.
Well, they did show that she was following the assassin from when Falcone went to visit his son's grave. The assassin was in there. Now, Batman did have a solo fight against the Scarecrow and the Mad Hatter, but I don't think that was as interesting as Catwoman's brawls, personally.
The first fight that Batman had against the Scarecrow, though, was fucking epic.
It was. It was really cool. It was definitely, I think, the best on-screen portrayal of the Scarecrow's fear toxin affecting Batman.
This is the coolest we've ever seen Scarecrow, period.
It definitely does him justice. I don't know if it's the coolest version, because, you have Batman Begins, but definitely one of the coolest takes on Scarecrow. I love when the gas didn't work because Batman was wearing a gas mask. He just pulled out the syringe. There's something I think so much more frightening about needles than gas.
Yeah.
And I love that, like, the video games and the comics have sort of been steering more in the needle direction.
Yeah, like with the Freddy Krueger kind of glove.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's pretty dope. How he just, like, stabs you with his syringe fingers. Crazy.
No, thank you. But speaking of Batman, Catwoman, and the rest, let's talk more about them in our character breakdown. As we mentioned last time, Jensen Ackles does a terrific job voicing both Bruce Wayne and Batman in this film. And I think in particular, his Bruce Wayne really gets a chance to shine in the second half.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I didn't quite pay attention to his Bruce Wayne and Batman differences in the first movie until after you mentioned it in our review, but this time I definitely made sure to really pay attention to that, and it was such a good performance.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that he's the Batman in this universe, and I'm so glad we'll be getting more of his Batman.
Yeah, hopefully.
Now, Batman is still very much a new hero in this film, letting characters like Poison Ivy, Scarecrow, and even the Mad Hatter get the better of him. But by the end, he comes into his own as a detective, following loose threads that even a veteran such as Gordon couldn't be bothered to follow. And he really comes to trust his own detective instincts. Both Part 1 and Part 2 did a fantastic job, much better than the comic, in establishing a history between Bruce and Carmine Falcone. Getting the two-headed coin from Carmine when Bruce was just a boy was such a brilliant stroke of dramatic irony. Like, this whole film, both films, after seeing them multiple times, are loaded with dramatic irony and double entendre. Each time I watch them, I get something new out of it. Now, the night Bruce's father saved Falcone's life is something that brings real conflict to Bruce and his relationship with his parents, which really defines the character. If Thomas Wayne hadn't saved Falcone's life, so much of Gotham would have been spared from the mobster's villainy. Bruce even wonders in this film whether he became Batman to honor his parents or redeem them of their mistakes. But Alfred reminds Bruce that ultimately he's following the morally righteous legacy of his father in doing what's right and saving lives. It's a pretty good analog to why Batman doesn't kill the Joker.
Yeah, and I really like Alfred's line about whether you're redeeming them or honoring them, they'd be proud of you regardless. I thought that was really touching and an aspect of Batman that I think very few Batman stories address. Like, we know that Batman took on this crusade against villainy due to the death of his parents, but what really is the nature of Bruce's feelings toward his parents?
Yeah, that's hardly ever explored in the films. We know that he loves them. We know that in some part he's sort of driven by revenge, a crusade against the kind of criminality that killed his parents.
Yeah. He definitely admired them.
Yeah, and their philanthropy. I mean, he probably doesn't love the fact that his father had business dealings with Carmine in opening those hospitals, but he still loves the fact that his father opened hospitals.
Yeah.
This film, again, has one of the best examinations of the character of Batman that we've seen in a lot of Batman films, and there have been a lot of them. Moving on to Harvey Dent, he was once again voiced by Josh Duhamel, who gave probably my favorite voice performance this go-round. Honestly, at a certain point, I didn't even hear Duhamel, I just heard Dent, and his Two-Face was really good, like scary good. It's something you'd expect from a veteran voice actor from the cartoons, not from a film actor.
Definitely not. And if you watch a show like What If, and you hear some of the movie cast providing their voice to an animated role, it can sometimes feel a little bit clunky, like the delivery isn't quite spot on. So it serves to remind you the difference between film actors and voice actors. Josh Duhamel, film actor, freaking nailed this role. I was actually blown away by it.
It was such a fantastic performance. There's gotta be awards for voice acting. I don't know what they are, but I hope he gets some kind of consideration for that because it was remarkable.
Yeah, I think this is the best Two-Face since the Dark Knight movie.
Yeah, totally. So as we mentioned, this version of Harvey is revealed to be much more murderous before his transformation into Two-Face than in the comics. Watching through the films again and seeing the physical features of the Holiday Killer when they showed him, I'm almost convinced Dent committed all of the holiday murders except for Maroni's. I'm also almost convinced Gilda let him do all of that for her.
Yeah, I mean, because if he didn't, then this movie is guilty of audience manipulation, because the Holiday Killer was always portrayed as this big buff dude. And Gilda is the exact opposite of a big buff dude. So obviously the film was trying to deter people from thinking it was her, probably thinking about the people who had read the comic book and trying to convince them that they were going a vastly different route with the Holiday Killer.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, part of me, the majority of time I was watching this, was still convinced that the Holiday Killer was Alberto.
Yeah, but then like you have scenes like Sal Maroni's death where Two-Face was actually there with Maroni, and then like the Holiday Killer pops out. That dude was still pretty buff, and obviously that had to have been Gilda.
Shoulder pads, dude. Shoulder pads.
I guess.
I mean, he was pretty much in shadow there, the Holiday Killer, so I don't think you could say one way or the other. I've watched that multiple times, so it could have been Gilda, I think.
Okay.
But if Harvey did a majority, if not all of the killings, it makes the clear breakdown of his and Gilda's marriage over the year that the story takes place all the more disheartening. Because he was committing these horrible, horrible acts for someone who really wasn't in love with him anymore.
Well, she admitted to being in love with him.
But I think she was still more in love with Alberto. You know, when the police were talking about her husband, when they had her trapped in her house, she was saying, you know, my husband's dead. And they were like, ma'am, that's not true. And she was like, yeah, it is. Because she was referring to Alberto.
She was referring to her first husband.
Exactly.
There's a lot of subtext in this movie.
Oh, absolutely.
Sure.
Absolutely.
I think I would almost prefer the story if it was indeed the case that Harvey Dent was the main killer.
Yeah, I agree. I think it has to be that way. You know, there were signs like Harvey picking up the letter opener when Maroni visited him, or even like back in the first movie when he like just stared at Falcone's building from the street in his hospital gown. You know, these were signs that Dent was not mentally well. And of course, we know as comic fans that Dent becomes Two-Face, but there were a lot more clues in this film as to his fate than are readily apparent upon first viewing. Moving on to Catwoman, Naya Rivera returned as the voice of Catwoman, which, as we mentioned before, was sadly her last professional work she did before her tragic death in 2020. This film reveals why Catwoman was so obsessed with the Falcone crime family and why she wanted Batman's help in bringing them down. She resented her father, Carmine Falcone, for quite possibly not even being aware of her existence as his illegitimate daughter. Seeing as how she reacted around Alberto in the first film and Sophia in this film gains some added dimension when you know the secret of her parentage. And her parentage was mostly still a secret from her as well. She didn't know her mother's name, not until the end of the film, when Falcone mistakes her for a woman named Luisa as he lay dying. It's a bittersweet moment for Selena, who just recently failed to save her half-sister Sophia from falling off of a building, and finally, potentially, gaining a mother, or at least information about a mother, while losing a father.
I'm just remembering that Alberto came on to her in the first movie.
Yeah.
And she like freaked out.
She was like, no, I mean, you and I, we can't, because it's you and I. She knew, but he didn't.
Yeah.
Now, as much as this is a story of Batman or Dent, it's also a story of Carmine Falcone, or at least his death. He was voiced by Titus Welliver, who did, again, a fantastic job. Now, I mentioned in the review for part 1 that Falcone isn't really the antagonist of the story. He's more like the victim of the mysterious holiday killer, but I can't really label him that after the reveal at the end about what he did to Gilda. There's this great line during the flashback scene of when Thomas Wayne saved his life, when Carmine tells young Bruce Wayne that all we get in this life is what we take. And really, this story is of how Falcone finally, brutally gets his comeuppance. Batman revealed as much to Falcone just before he died.
Yeah, it almost seemed like Batman had some kind of strange reverence to Falcone in that he revealed his secret identity to him moments before his passing. I wonder why he did that.
Because he did have a relationship with Falcone. You know, he knew him from when he was a young boy. You can't say that Batman knew, like, the Joker from when he was young.
And I guess Falcone did refer to him as a son.
Right, exactly. Now, what happened to Falcone, it was revenge, served on a cold dish, consisting of the death of his entire family and everything he held dear. He was one of many villains in this movie, and he somehow emerged as having more character and interest than many of those villains, like the Joker, like the Penguin, in this film, thanks to the changes they made for him.
Yeah, he was multi-dimensional as opposed to Batman's regular rogues gallery, which were fairly one-dimensional.
The only other major character in this film would be Commissioner Gordon. I don't have much to say about him other than what I said in Part 1's review. The voice actor Billy Burke was great in the role, but Gordon is a pretty static character. He went through the least amount of change in the story. He was really more of a side character this time, and someone for Batman to work with in the film. Moving on to the plot breakdown, the film begins on Valentine's Day, picking up about a month after the first film's after-credits scene of Alberto's funeral. Bruce Wayne has been under the control of Poison Ivy, who was hired by Carmine Falcone to force Bruce into signing over many of Wayne Enterprises' assets and property to him.
And launder money for him.
Right. Meanwhile, the holiday killings continue, killing mobsters under both Falcone and his rival Sal Maroni during Valentine's Day and St. Patrick's Day. On April Fool's Day, Catwoman sneaks into Wayne Manor and rescues Bruce from Poison Ivy. Which was an interesting day for that to happen. In the comics, actually that's the Riddler-focused comic, and the Riddler was nowhere to be found in this film, unfortunately.
Oh, that's true, yeah. Well, I mean, they spent so much time with him in the Hush movie, they probably wanted to, give him the day off for this movie.
Yeah. In the comic, Carmine hired the Riddler to find out the identity of the Holiday Killer, and because the Riddler worked for Falcone, Holiday tried to kill the Riddler, but because it was April Fool's, he just, shot an outline around him. Like, April Fool's, I didn't do a killing this day.
Oh, strange.
It was almost humorous.
Huh.
Now, by Mother's Day, the holiday killings return. This time, the victim is a black market gun dealer who's been making Holiday's signature gun to commit their murders. Meanwhile, Batman gets injected with fear toxin by the Scarecrow, who is broken out of Arkham Asylum by Falcone's daughter, Sophia. Hallucinating, Batman makes his way to Crime Alley, where his parents died. Catwoman finds him and returns him home to Wayne Manor.
Again, showing up right when she's needed. I do think that Jensen Ackles gave a great voice performance, though, as Batman who's, crying out for his mother.
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah, when he's on his steps at Wayne Manor, just asking where his mother is to Alfred.
I've never seen that side of Batman before.
No, and it was a deeply moving performance there. On Father's Day, Sophia visits her father and learns that in order to save his failing organized crime empire, thanks in part to the holiday killings, Falcone is resorting to working with Arkham Asylum supervillains in desperation, like the Scarecrow. District Attorney Harvey Dent and Commissioner Gordon visit Bruce Wayne at Wayne Manor to question him. Dent accuses Bruce's father of legitimizing the Falcone crime family, and Bruce remembers the night his father saved Carmine Falcone's life by treating his gunshot wounds in their house. That same day, Maroni visits his father, who's killed outside his own home by the holiday killer. That night, Falcone visits his son Alberto's grave, where he meets and pays a nameless assassin. It was kind of interesting to see how much time each one of these different holidays took up. I think a majority of this film was centered around Mother's Day, Father's Day, and the quote-unquote Roman holiday in August, Falcone's birthday.
Yeah, it was like the world's longest Father's Day, I have to say.
Yeah, a lot happened. Now, Maroni visits Dent's office where he offers to testify against Falcone. During Independence Day, Falcone's hired assassin attacks the Dents as they watch fireworks at Gotham Pier. Catwoman helps Dent chase and attack the assassin, but they both get knocked out in the process. Dent wakes up to find the assassin dead in front of him, his hands bloodied, and the holiday gun at his feet. He flees the scene as the authorities arrive. Meanwhile, Batman dispatches Scarecrow and the Mad Hatter, who were both hired by Falcone to rob a bank.
Now, what does the Mad Hatter do again? Because I remember, like, in the animated series, he had some kind of, like, mind control technology, but here, he just seemed like some annoying dude.
His power is essentially mind control. That didn't play a factor in here or in the comic, actually. The mind control aspect was really more Poison Ivy's thing in this film. If it were up to me, I would have replaced the Mad Hatter with the Riddler. I just like him more as a character.
Yeah, Mad Hatter kind of sucks.
They really didn't showcase his whole power at all. So.
No.
In August, before Dent questions Maroni in the courtroom stand, Batman searches Dent's basement as evidence and accusations mount that he's the Holiday Killer. Batman finds Holiday's signature weapons there, and as he shows Gordon what he found, Maroni tosses acid in Dent's face in the courtroom, believing Dent was the Holiday Killer.
Well, he was right, so, makes sense.
Apparently, yeah, in the movie he was. Now, recovering in the hospital, Dent receives a phone call from Falcone wanting to meet. He escapes the hospital and kills 2 of Falcone's men when he realizes Falcone led him into a trap. Then Dent escaped into the sewer. I thought that was pretty cool, the way Two-Face took on those 2 henchmen. He was like, he wants to speak to you. And then just, boom, took him out. That was pretty cool.
It's pretty clever. If I ever find myself in a situation where, I get a mysterious phone call while being held at gunpoint by 2 dudes, I'll pull that trick.
Yeah, now I know what to do. That night during Falcone's birthday party, the Holiday Killer strikes again, this time killing Falcone's sister, Carla Vitti. After Batman questions Dent's wife, Gilda, about Dent's whereabouts, we see Dent has been living in the sewer with Solomon Grundy, who inspires Dent that a man can be reborn and live 2 lives, and he removes his face bandages. On Labor Day, at Arkham Asylum, Batman questions Calendar Man, who helps Batman realize that if Holiday is Dent, his next target will most likely be Maroni. Gordon and Batman transfer Maroni that same day, using him to draw out Dent, who attacks the transfer vehicle with the help of Solomon Grundy. As Gordon, Batman, and Dent stand off, the Holiday Killer arrives and kills Maroni. Dent stops Batman from pursuing the Holiday Killer before escaping with Grundy. Gordon and Batman realize that they're back to square one in regards to the Holiday Killer's identity. Now, on Labor Day in the comics, that's when we get the reveal that Alberto was the Holiday Killer. So for them in this film to sort of go back to square one, I was like, oh my gosh, who is it? Who is it? I was really intrigued by this point. I mean, I figured it was Gilda, but I wasn't 100% sure. On Halloween, as Gordon and Batman debate whether to pursue Dent as the Holiday Killer, Dent and Grundy break into Arkham Asylum and free the inmates. As Batman watches over Falcone, Falcone attacks him, though Batman is saved by Catwoman, who reveals to Batman that Falcone is her father, just as the Arkham inmates create explosions on the other side of the city in order to distract Gotham's authorities and Batman.
And now this is where the interesting comment by Falcone was made, where it seemed like he had at that point deduced that the killer was Gilda. It also made me think of a moment from the first movie where Falcone was discussing with his son Alberto about the flowers that Alberto left for Gilda in the hospital. And I thought it was kind of cheap of the movie to have that discussion between those two without mentioning Alberto's history with Gilda at that point. Because I think that if it was a total organic, non-scripted situation, Gilda's past with the family would have totally been brought up. But they chose to ignore that for the purposes of sustaining the mystery for this story, which I didn't think was quite fair.
That's totally a fair point to bring up. I agree with that. I do think, though, it added a new extra dimension to that part of the story in that Alberto was trying to reach out to Gilda and comfort her.
Yeah.
With Falcone unprotected, Dent, Joker, Penguin, Grundy, Poison Ivy, Scarecrow, and the Mad Hatter storm Falcone's penthouse and attack him. Before Dent can decide Falcone's fate with the toss of a coin, Batman and Catwoman arrive and take down all of the Arkham inmates, with only Dent remaining. Since Falcone's coin toss came up bad, Dent shoots him twice in the throat. Sophia arrives, enraged at her father's death, and stumbles out of the window, despite Catwoman's attempt to save her. When Catwoman reveals her true identity as Selena Kyle to the dying Falcone, he mistakes her for a woman named Louisa. Batman reveals his identity to Falcone before he dies and says that he still believes in Gotham City.
Falcone didn't really seem to care that Batman was Bruce Wayne.
He definitely didn't seem surprised. I mean, he was also dying at the moment.
Yeah, he's probably more concerned with other things.
On top of the GCPD headquarters, Dent, now Two-Face, turns himself in for Falcone's murder along with the rest of the holiday killings. Batman later confronts Gilda in her home, and she reveals that prior to marrying Dent, she and Alberto were married and pregnant, but Falcone forced their annulment and an abortion. Bent on revenge, Gilda married Dent for his help in bringing down Falcone's empire. It's left ambiguous as to whether Batman turns Gilda in for her involvement in the holiday killings.
Well, it totally seemed like he didn't. He just walked out of there, leaving her with her semi-justice and leaving Dent to take the fall for everything.
Which seems very out of character for Batman. But again, I guess that's the implication. We don't know what happens, though, and that's the frustrating part.
I think comic book Batman would totally bring Gilda in for her crimes.
For all we know, that's what happened. They just never show it. It's hard to say what happened one way or the other. And I don't know if that's poetic. Like I said earlier, the more I dwell on it, the more I kind of realize I wouldn't be happy either way.
Yeah, because Batman is somewhat faithful to Harvey Dent and his friendship with him. But he's also a pursuer of justice, so who's to say?
Right, exactly.
Flip a coin, I guess.
There you go. In the end, Bruce criticizes Alfred's hope for trick-or-treaters at Wayne Manor, only for a little boy to show up in a Batman costume.
Are they making Batman costumes in Gotham City?
This kid is totally cosplaying. That was an original piece. He's just a really big fan.
It's like, I mean, I guess they would do it because everybody's so afraid of Batman throughout the city. But
yeah, he's like the boogeyman. This kid's essentially dressing up like the boogeyman.
Yeah, but it was a fairly accurate reproduction, I think.
Was this the same family that stumbled upon Batman in Crime Alley when he was hallucinating? I couldn't tell.
It may have been. I have no idea.
And that may be why his costume was so accurate.
Okay.
It was right there. And in after credits scene, the Flash and Green Arrow also randomly show up at the manor. Not sure how they even know how Bruce Wayne is Batman.
I thought that was pretty cool. Despite the fact that we don't know how they know, I thought it was a pretty clever way to bring them into the fold.
I would have liked to have seen more.
Get in the Justice League.
There you go. There you go. So all in all, with the film's colorful cast of characters and surprising twists to a story already full of mystery and intrigue, Part 2 was mostly satisfying and I'd argue a mostly successful conclusion to the Long Halloween story. So I give it 4 stars.
I agree. The things that I loved about the first movie, I also love about this one. It's just that the resolution did not bring all of the closure that I was looking for. They did leave a little bit of ambiguity and a few plot holes that I think don't ruin the experience, but definitely subtract from it in a small way. So if this film is inferior to the first part, then yeah, I'll say it's 4 stars. But I'll still claim these 2 parts as one of the most successful adaptations of a DC storyline.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. This story, of course, inspired Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, one of the themes of which was escalation. Batman emerged to take on the mob, and in response, as depicted in this film, superpowered supervillains took over. Using this story as a launchpad for Batman's character in DC's new animated universe was a stroke of genius, and I can't wait to see how things escalate from here.
We don't yet know what the next DC animated film will be within this new animated universe.
Yeah, we have the Injustice animated film coming out. We also have a Catwoman animated film coming out, but we don't know yet if that's part of this universe. The Injustice one definitely isn't. So we'll see. But that does it for this review. Let us know what you thought about the movie by writing to us at dynamicduelpodcast@gmail.com or by visiting us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. You can find links to all of our accounts by checking out our show notes or visiting our website, dynamicduel.com.
And on our site, you could also find a link to our Patreon page where we offer bonus content, including bonus episodes and monthly live watch-alongs, collectible pin sets, and access to our Discord server. Check it out right after this episode. Our lowest tier is only $2 a month, and this Saturday, August 14th, we will be putting out a bonus episode of this podcast where Jonathan and I count down our top 10 comic book storylines. You don't want to miss it.
In our next episode, in lead up to Halloween, after this review of The Long Halloween, we will be pitting Frankenstein against Elsa Bloodstone.
Yeah, Elsa Bloodstone will be one of the characters that I will be including in my Midnight Suns team for the Justice League Dark versus Midnight Suns team duel. If you don't know who Bloodstone is, then you're missing out, because she's like the Buffy the Vampire Slayer of the Marvel Universe. I first read about her in the Next Wave comic books, but she's been in awesome stories like Marvel Zombies, Marvel Monsters, Legion of Monsters, Monsters Unleashed. She's like Marvel's premier monster hunter, kind of like in the same way that Blade is Marvel's premier vampire hunter. So learn all about her in our next episode. I think it'll be a really fun match to pit her against a DC character as iconic as Frankenstein, who of course was the leader of the Creature Commandos.
Right, and he was also an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. and a member of Justice League Dark for a time. So look forward to that next week. But that does it for this episode. We want to give a big thanks to our executive producers Ken Johnson, Jace Crump, John Starosky, John Speas, John Bechinina, Stephen Lovato, Mitchell Phipps, and Zachary Hepburn. Happy birthday once again. You guys make this podcast possible.
And we'll talk to everyone next week. Up, and...
Hey, you can't say that. I'm not going to say True Believers. I'll fucking die before I do that.
I'm going to go take a shower after that one.
Up, and away.
True Believers?
Chris, you really think that the remake of Power Rangers was better than Avengers Endgame?
Absolutely,
Guys?
100%.
What is wrong
It is
with you?
way better.
No, it's not,
It's just
dude.
way better than...
How am I
no,
even
it's not.
related
It's
to you?
amazing. I mean, Endgame's not bad,
Guys,
but...
guys.
What, Chelsea?
Chelsea?
We're running out of time for the commercial.
Wait, we're recording that right now? That's happening right now?
Yes, right now.
Oh my gosh. Well, what do the people need to know?
Well, they need to know where to find us.
Well, they can find us on Spotify, iTunes, Anchor, all the regular stuff.
And they can follow us on Instagram if they want to see, social media content.
Yeah, at Ready to Retro.
But they don't even know who we are.
Well, I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.
And I'm Chelsea.
And we're Ready to Retro.
Are you?